I remember when I first got sober, I called my brother and I was just talking to him and he said, man, it was so like awesome growing up in our house, you know, it was like so creative and I felt so free. And I remember thinking, like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was one of 9 kids, and for me, it felt like so chaotic, and it felt like I had so much shame about like the chaos, and it felt like dirty and unorganized, and I had so many negative perceptions of myself and my family. And I remember my dad's car, and I remember the brown rust spots on the side of his car, and being embarrassed when he would drop me off at school. And like, you know, like just thinking like when the car would pull up, like, oh man, like I hope nobody's looking at this car, you know. And I remember like, you know, having hand-me-down clothes and like, and being just very self-conscious of all this shame that I carried around my family. And, you know, when I was around 14, I discovered the solution to like the shame. It was great. Lots of alcohol and drugs. And it worked really well. And I didn't have any of that shame anymore, and I could walk into a room and be super fucking confident, and I could feel like the coolest person in the room. Like that's kind of what I wanted to be, you know, the kind of the best one, you know. That's sort of what my goal was, I guess, at the time. And so when I was 14, I really discovered this solution, and I really applied it. And by the time I was 16, I had a lot of proof and a lot of evidence that I was very cool. So many of you probably guessed this already, but I'm a very good rapper. And I was the lead singer in a rap funk band in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A lot of you have probably heard of Booty Snoot. We were pretty hot shit. And you know, people from my high school would come see our shows. We would sell out all these shows, and I would just be like, just get totally wasted, very high. Like I'd perform, I felt completely free, and it was, you know, incredible. And I really felt like I had, achieved, you know, that thing that I was looking for. And unfortunately, also when this solution. Other things happened when I drank. And I don't always remember all of my night, but one particular night, I remember little spurts, and so I'll just give you this one night. So Booty Snoot was playing. It was New Year's Eve. A lot of people from my high school were there, you know, and the first thing I remember is like I was performing on stage, on top of the world. Later on, I'm like on the second floor of this party, and I'm like just drinking vodka, and then the cops like raid the party. This is the 2nd District Gang Squad in Milwaukee, so they're like way too armed for a like a Booty Snoot show. So so they come in, and there's like 300 people there, and somehow I'm the only one who's like, motherfucker, go fuck yourself, you know. And I'm very confident, you know, when I'm drunk, and I pick fights with people who would beat me up. So they arrested me for disorderly conduct, and which I think is pretty cool, you know. At least when I'm drunk, I think that's like, wow, that's cool, you know, getting arrested in front of your high school. And I'm being cuffed, and I'm walking down the stairs, and they were counting the money from the show, and I kicked over the money, and that was interfering with a police investigation. So that was another misdemeanor. Then later on, pretty cool, right? I know. So. Later on, I'm at the precinct, and they're like doing my paperwork, and I slipped out of my cuff, and I sort of was like, hey, can I get some water? And the guy was like filling out my paperwork. He's like, no, we're not getting you water. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can go get some water. And like I'm just gesticulating and trying to get him to notice that I've slipped out of the cuffs. I'm very confident when I drink. There's not a lot of shame, and I feel very, bold. So I decided it was a good idea to make a run for it when I'm out of the cuffs. And I run into the parking garage, and 3 officers chase me, and they tackle me. And then so the next like kind of memory burst is I'm hogtied in a cell. And I think it's a good idea to like pick a fight with the dude in the cell across the cell from me. So And then, you know, another spurt that I remember is being handcuffed to a hospital bed and looking over, and there was a guy in the bed next to me, and he had like a bullet wound in his stomach. And then, and again, I was still no fear of that in that situation. Then the next morning, a lot of fear and a lot of shame, and all of it comes back, and it feels like there's like a boot on my chest, and I'm embarrassed, and I'm getting processed at the Milwaukee County Jail on New Year's Day, and it was a Friday and a holiday, so I'm spending 3 days in the county jail, and I remember crying, and being scared, and I remember also being aware that it probably wasn't a great place to be showing that I'm scared and crying. That's just an example of something that would happen when I would drink, and despite that, I continued to make the decision to drink for 14 more years. And when I was first in recovery, when I was in early recovery, I was talking to a guy who had been around a little longer than me. And he was a Native American guy, Terry, and he told me a story from his childhood. And he and his friend were getting high, and they went back to his friend's house. And his friend's dad was sitting there, and his dad kind of knew they were high, and he said, "Terry, you see that dog bowl?" And he's like, "Yeah." He said, I put rotten meat by accident in that dog bowl one time, and the dog ate it and got sick. He said, that dog will never eat from that bowl again. He won't eat out of the bowl. And then Terry said, he looked at him and he said, "You're going to keep going back to that bowl." And, I wasn't homeless. I wasn't, whatever, what you consider an alcoholic to look like, I guess. Or I did anyway. But I kept going back to that bowl, 4.5 years into my sobriety, I found myself being paid, flown around the country, being paid to freestyle rap at beer festivals. And one such event was in Telluride, Colorado, and it was the Blues and Brews Festival. And I had just been paid all day to freestyle rap. And Booty Snoop, by the way, was modeled after George Clinton. And so I was backstage. Oh, by the way, weed is legal. So what I'm describing to you is 16-year-old Patrick's fucking dream come true. And George Clinton was the headliner at the event. And I was backstage, and I hadn't put all this together. And I was talking to a guy who I was helping, who's new in recovery. And that's sort of part of it, And I was talking to him, and I think maybe I helped him, and he helped me, and I hung up the phone, and I looked up, and, I saw the skyline in this mountain town, and I, smelled the air. It was beautiful, and all those things that I wanted to escape from had no appeal to me, and I just wanted to, walk around this town. And, I felt like I actually found true freedom. Thank you.